Good evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers and our distinguished guests today on this show. It's an absolute honor to have Dr. Sam Pitroda with us, who has been the father of uh, Indian telecom when it first started its journey in the 90s. He was the chief scientific advisor who brought in computers and telecom into our country, and I think the country cannot be grateful enough for that to him. We also have the Honorable Member of Parliament, Shri Kumar Ketkar, who's a very senior journalist, very respected journalist, Member of Parliament, Padma Shri. He started his career with the Economic Times, moved on to become the chief editor of Lok Satta, and he has since been on many parliamentary debates and other things. He's on the Parliamentary Committee for External Affairs. And we also have Mr. Tom Syriac, who's a very senior vice president at the Bhawan Group in Muscat, who basically specialize in automobile sales and finance. So he's a corporate man at this point of time in his career, but he had started his career in media with Rashtriya Deepika back in the 90s, and he was their marketing man at that point of time. And under his leadership, their sales jumped many times over. So he would be the right man probably to talk about that aspect of the media. So if I may come to you first, Dr. Petroda, our topic today, as you all know, is responsible journalism. Now, what does responsible journalism mean to you, Dr. Petroda? If you would kindly tell us that.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be with you all. I think journalism by itself has to be seen in a larger context. To me, one who brings news to you has to be much more rational, has to really bring facts in front of people. And to me, responsible journalism means taking responsibility for bringing news to people which are unbiased, which are not colored by your own thinking, or which are not reflected in any kind of support you get from anybody. Today, a lot of the media gets automatically biased based on the funding they get, based on the point of view their bosses or owners represent. And they unconsciously are put in a situation where they push one particular agenda as opposed to giving general view which is unbiased and which gives opportunity to everybody to present their view. Many times we talk about media being captured, media being hijacked. What we really mean there is that media takes one position on their own and then keep pushing that agenda, which may not be in public interest, which may be in the interest of a narrow group of people. And when that happens, we feel that media is not responsible. Different people have different version of it. But to me, responsible media really comes from a responsible person who understands that the overall task is to present to the public facts from different parties and give everybody a fair chance. to express their opinion and not get colored by your own personal agenda,
Right.
corporate agenda, and confused.
So that's a great beginning, sir, and you've really set the tone for the discussion. Coming to the Honorable MP, Ketkar sir, if I might go back to my own childhood a little bit, experiences of newspapers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I remember my grandparents and my father and various uncles of that generation. They were all die-hard readers of the Statesman. They would swear by that newspaper, and anything that appeared in that newspaper was had their implicit sort of understanding and backing. And at that point of time, the editors were, I think, extremely well known as to who they were and well respected. When the emergency came along, a lot of these editors went to jail because they stood up for their beliefs and spoke out against the emergency. The 70s and 80s, the whole of the 70s and 80s, I think, especially the Statesman and the Indian Express to a large extent, I think they were known for their investigative journalism. So that was probably the most glorious period of the Indian journalistic journey, I would say. So what happened from there? Why, what changed from that point onwards to what Dr. Petroda just said? That now we probably have media which is giving us colored versions of the news and probably, not the right kind of perspective on most issues. What changed from that point onwards to how it is today? What would you say on that, sir?
Well, actually, I will not totally agree with you that the journalism of the 60s and 70s and early 80s was always responsible journalism.
Right.
But I agree with you totally that the journalists at that time, the editors, senior editors and senior correspondents were responsible people. And the relationship between editors and the reporters or the assistant editors was smooth, and they tolerated each other even if they differed on views. That much we can definitely say about that time. However, that does not mean that all the journalism that was practiced in those days was responsible journalism.
Right.
I can just cite the same issue which you raised, that of emergency.
Right.
Actually, only 2 or 3 editors were, actually suffered jail. It is not most of the editors.
Right.
Point number 2, that doesn't mean that those editors who did not go to jail were irresponsible people. They were also responsible.
Right.
Like Shamlal was Times of India's editor, very responsible, erudite person. Girilal Jain was Times of India's editor, very responsible and erudite person. B.G. Varghese was Hindustan Times editor, very erudite. So the question is not, they were not responsible. The question was, politics began to get polarized sometime in the late 60s and early 70s.
Right.
Because it is only emergency which is condemned, which is rightly condemned. But let us not forget that emergency actually was forced on Indira Gandhi, because the irresponsible politics that was played by opposition at that time, like Jayaprakash Narayan himself, a saintly freedom fighter. But a saintly freedom fighter gave up responsible politics and joined the bandwagon of Indira Hatao politics. So Indira Hatao politics finally led for him to appeal to army and police to not to obey the government's orders. Not only that, he even defended the dissolution of Gujarat Assembly under threat of Morarji Desai's indefinite fast. That was quite irresponsible, but the media condemns only Indira Gandhi for whatever she did. They do not condemn what led to emergency.
Right.
Nobody can defend what happened during emergency. Nobody can defend.
Right.
Because I myself was a journalist, and even I have suffered restrictions and censorship at that time. But what was happening prior to emergency was no less reprehensible than what happened during emergency. Both are equally. reprehensible things.
Right.
So those who did not support Jayaprakash Narayan and only opposed Indira Gandhi were becoming heroes like Kuldeep Nair and Nikhil Chakravarti and others. They were rightly they were heroes, but that does not mean that the other journalists who did not support Jayaprakash Narayan were in any way irresponsible journalists. So, the good and bad, the right and wrong, the evil and virtue, all were traveling together. However, the most important thing was there was some kind of what we can call tolerance, dignity, and decency, even if they strongly differed, but that remained. That kind of dignity remained.
Right.
That dignity, to answer your question, when did it begin to disappear? It began to disappear mainly because of polarization politics. Polarization politics actually in the recent years begins sometime in 1989-90. At that time, actually you will definitely recall Sam, of course, because Sam was deeply involved. The debate between 1985 and 90 or 1983 when Sam came here, 82-83 with Indira Gandhi, everybody thinks that Rajiv brought him, actually Indira brought him to Indian politics and Rajiv he continued with. And that time, what was the debate? The debate was on very secular modern things like computerization, telecommunications, spread of technology. Those were the issues that were discussed in the media between 83 and 89.
Right.
After 89, that is after the defeat of Rajiv Gandhi's government, things began to change. Why did things begin to change? Because the entire campaign against Rajiv Gandhi was shifted from technology issues, development issues, modernism issues, secular issues to Ayodhya and Bofors. In Bofors, nothing has come out. Nobody has been proved guilty. The courts worked under various governments, even BJP government between 1998 and 2004. But Arun Jaitley himself came on television and said there is no charge or no evidence against Rajiv Gandhi. But Rajiv Gandhi was defeated under the Bofors charge and the Ayodhya movement. Now, those things began to polarize politics. One way of polarization was Hindu versus non-Hindu. That was picked up by the BJP. In 1990, after 1 year after defeat of Rajiv Gandhi, there was Rath Yatra. That actually heated the atmosphere in politics. And Bofors was actually used, and nothing has come out of it, was used to condemn Rajiv Gandhi. So according to me, the defeat of Rajiv Gandhi and prior to that, the campaign against Rajiv Gandhi was polarized on one issue, anti-Congressism, that is anti-Rajiv Gandhi, anti-Nehru, anti-Indira Gandhi, and second was Hindu movement. So these two issues combined, and that is how politics in 1989-90 began to get polarized. The result was Rajiv Gandhi was killed. Sam Pitola had to go back to US, and in 1992, following the Rath Yatra led by Lal Krishna Advani, Babri Masjid was demolished. After Babri Masjid is demolished, till today we find the same binary politics, Hindu-Muslim, and therefore the entire media is enveloped by that binary debate. And during this time, two things happened which changed the course of journalism. One, the ownership model began to change. A few top corporate houses today now dominate almost 70% of the media. So they define the agenda. So one is the corporate control. Second is technology. And technology actually created facilities, but then technology fell into these hands, irresponsible hands or corporate hands, and they used the technology to actually pursue the polarized politics or anti-Congressism or anti-secularism agenda. As a result, what we are finding is that all journalists take side between Hindu-Muslim and between anti-Congressism and opposition. Today, opposition has virtually no place, no space on television. Just simple example, if you don't mind, Akhilesh Yadav is holding huge rallies, absolutely huge rallies in UP. Priyanka Gandhi is holding huge rallies in UP, but they are not covered, they are not shown. There are so many scams which are happening right under the nose of Prime Minister, but media is not investigating them. In fact, media is keen to investigate some old stories which have been buried also, which actually hurt Congress, and they involve even Pandit Nehru and his father for condemning Congress. I don't mind if they condemn for wrong things, but that is not the agenda. The agenda is polarization of politics between Congress and opposition and BJP, and the second polarization, Hindu-Muslim. So this polarization has affected media, and not only media owners, but media journalists also, and some journalists are also pursuing the agenda, not always because the corporates are guiding them, but also because they believe in the Hindu agenda. So there is a lot of infiltration of very communal oriented journalists in the media, and when they are not communal interested politics agenda being carried, it is being forced on them by the corporate interests or the political interests. So all this began after the 1990-92, and that's why we are seeing exactly 30 years ago, Babri Masjid was demolished, and during these 30 years, media has been polarized, and it takes a political position, agenda-based position, as Sam said, and not objective realities. Thank you very much.
Right.
But very good.
Thank you, sir. Coming to you, Tom, just picking up on that point of corporate interference. After liberalization, the business model of many media houses changed. If you remember, the newspaper prices dropped to 1 rupee a newspaper. Now, obviously, 1 rupee could not be the production cost of the newspaper. That was probably many times more than that. So basically, the newspaper, which was actually being sold at a much lower price for whatever reason at that point of time, was subsidized by corporate houses, by advertisements, and the like. So when that happened, when that change of model of the business model of the newspapers changed, how did it affect the journalism of the day? How did it affect the way media houses functioned at that point of time? Since you were involved with Deepika at that stage, I ask you this question.
Yeah, thank you, Arijit, and I am very happy to be part of this discussion, very inevitable discussion, along with Dr. Pitroda and Mr. Katkar. It's a very known fact that in the early 90s, when we had the liberalization, the way the business was conducted for newspapers and other media houses changed. Till then, it was not looked upon as a business. Since liberalization happened, there was a huge surge in revenue from advertisements.
Right.
Because if you remember, there was a lot of public issues happening, a lot of new products getting introduced, multinationals coming to India to set up house. So they were going in a big way in terms of, giving advertisements on the media, both in television as well as in newspapers.
Right.
So many corporates took it as a business where they can earn money. It became a corporate business. The media got sold to corporate houses, or they thought there's a good avenue wherein you can make good money. Also, you can influence your ideas and your products and whatever it is.
Right.
So this actually had an influence on the way the business was conducted. I got a post-graduation in business. Till that time, I don't think many media houses were putting business graduates into their administration or looking at how revenue can be generated for the media. Since then, you can see most of the media is run by the people who have come from a business background or people who have been educated. The outlook is how to generate revenue. Now, this has a very positive effect because that time there was a lot of change in technology. There was a lot of investment which was required by media to stay afloat. So this definitely helped. But on the other side, what got affected was the independence of the media. If you see, till then, mostly it was all the newspapers or the big newspapers and the media was owned by family-driven businesses.
Right.
They had a lot of ethics. They had a lot of, it has come traditionally from their childhood, or their parents and grandparents have brought up these media houses. Their outlook was information and give the right information to the people. They had I would say, a noble objective when they were running this not as a business. They were running it with a purpose to tell people what exactly is happening.
As a public service, you mean?
It is most of, I mean, their objective, if you say, was 60 public service and 40 revenue, or
Right.
40 business.
Right.
But it shifted in the 90s. It became 90% business and 10% public service. So this had an effect, and definitely when this happens, your independence goes off, because you are dependent on corporates to give you advertisement. You are dependent on the government to give you advertisement revenue. And as you rightly suggested, there was a time when newspapers could be sold at 1 rupee, because you are having huge advertisement revenue coming at that point of time. But definitely when you have advertisement revenue, something you may not be able to represent the same way we earlier used to represent. I can tell from my personal experience, when I was responsible for generating revenue for our enterprise. So if we needed a positive news to be given for a particular corporate house, I'll take this press release, go to the editor and tell him, please put it, I need, because he's required to give me more revenue.
Right.
90% of the time he'll oblige. 10% of the time he'll say, keep it aside. I don't think I'll be able to do it. But
Right.
then it was a requirement for the corporate to have this kind of a change. So I think it happened inevitably, because it became a business. From what the purpose changed from, I think there was a shift in the purpose post liberalization, and people looked at it as a corporate house where you can generate income. And I think it had an effect on the overall way the independence of the media did change. Slowly it got changed. That's
Right.
what I have to tell you.
Right, right. So coming back to you, Dr. Pitroda, how damaging do you think this was? Advertisers and corporate houses basically controlling the content which was being dished out to the readers. And in India, I know from my own personal experience, if you read something in a newspaper, you take it as God's own truth. And very
True.
few people would have the wherewithal to, question it.
True.
So
Before I answer that, let me
right.
emphasize 2 points. One, not that everybody is brought out.
Right.
Not that everybody draws party line.
Right.
There are brave, independent journalists, media people, but there are very few.
Right.
It is not that 100% of media is sold out.
Absolutely.
But I would say majority of the media is sold out. And those brave few have a tough battle to fight. Second point I'd like to make is it is unfortunate that in India we do not have public broadcast service. See, in US we have a thing called PBS.
Right.
Similarly, we have a radio which is independent. We need independent public broadcast, independent national public radio, which is not owned by the government,
right,
but owned by public in a non-profit structure. So I think those two are important points I want to make.
Absolutely.
And then your question.
Yeah, how damaging was it?
It is damaging. It continues to damage our mindset. I agree with you that people believe what comes in the paper is gospel, is truth.
Absolutely.
They don't have time and energy to check facts. They don't have access to broad database of information to make their own judgment.
Right.
And as a result, biased media thrives on it. They select a particular audience, they capture their eyeballs, they capture their mindset, and then they penetrate into it. So there are people who write certain things, and there are people who read those things, and they believe this is the ultimate truth. And I think there is a very fine line between truth and lies, and some people cannot distinguish that.
Absolutely.
So today, in fact, this morning, I had another session somewhere, and I talked about the fact that, look, I was born in Gandhian era, and I was born in British Raj. So during that period, we learned to focus on truth, trust, love, diversity, inclusion. And all of these things are today being questioned. When I talk about truth, somebody else talks about lies. When I talk about trust, somebody else talks about mistrust. When I talk about love, they talk about hate. And that is the problem.
Right.
And as a result, like Kumar said, society gets further divided, polarized politics flourish, and unnecessary tensions emerge in every part of the society. And we spend a lot of time and energy in managing that and not really doing the work that needs to be done. You see, for prosperity, peace is essential.
Absolutely.
If we do not have peace in the community, there will not be prosperity. The politics of today ensures that there is no peace, that there is always this tension and fight and, jagda at community level between this community or that community.
Absolutely.
And that's not good for economy. That's not good for employment. That's not good for education. Okay. So today's challenge is, on one hand, we talk about sabka vikas, sabka saath, but that's a lie. Okay. Because the reality is very different. The same people who talk about sabka saath, sabka vikas says, hey, go kill all the Muslims. Don't buy from Muslims or break the church. Okay. You cannot have that. You got to start with fundamentals, and that is, we are all equal. Everybody needs to be respected. We need to give comfort to our community. And we cannot be divided based on race, religion, caste, color, language. The beauty of India is our diversity.
Absolutely.
Look at our food. Can you divide India based on food? That this is South Indian food and this is North Indian food? No. Then why do you divide people based on religion, certain practices? And all kinds of wrong data is published and projected. And lies apparently sell. Lies sell better than truth. People love gossip. And media takes advantage of that.
Right. Picking up on that issue of polarization and coming back to you, Kumar sir. Now, when 24/7, 24/7 news started, earlier it wasn't there, but when it started, and this constant bombardment of breaking news came onto our TV screens, where is the time, would you say, to actually check on the veracity of what is being reported? I probably feel that, given the competition from various news channels that we have nowadays, there is always this one-upmanship of who gets to report breaking news first. So probably would you say that there has been a breakdown of the earlier reticence and the reliance of facts that newspapers and news channels used to portray to the people? Is it that now it's just a question of reporting what you want to report, and there's no proper check or balance? And in a country like ours, where people believe anything and everything that is told to them by the media, how dangerous is that for the country?
Well, actually, it is dangerous, but let me also correct the impression that the media channels, there are in all 900 channels in India.
Right. Right.
Of them, nearly 400 or something like that channels only are news channels, that is 24 by 7 news channels.
Right.
Of those 24 by 7 news channels, something like 80 or 100 exclusively English channels, and the other 200 to 250 channels are Hindi channels, and the rest are language channels.
Right.
Now, actually, if you see, if you study, which I keep studying because I work in media for 50 years, I participated in television as well as in press. If you see actually the content analysis, there is no breaking news at all. Everybody is giving the same news.
Right.
All channels are giving essentially the same news. They may call it breaking news. They may give a small different angle, but essentially they are carrying the same story. For
Right.
instance, when Narendra Modi is speaking, whether it is in Madison Square or in Ahmedabad or Baroda or Chennai, he is in all channels, every single channel, including sometimes entertainment channels.
Right.
When he gives that Man Ki Baat, it is on all channels. That time, everybody is carrying Man Ki Baat. So, this kind of monopolization of the space and time on the media has no place for actually breaking news, even for competition. So, there is some minor competition between the channels, like who wrote or who reported first that Narendra Modi is going to America. That is not competition, that is not breaking news. So, what is breaking news is actually a fake idea of having a different story, which
Right.
used to be there, as you mentioned, between Indian Express and Statesman in those days. They were actually breaking stories in print. But
Exactly.
today, with these multiple channels, they are all having the same story. So, there is no question of competition. All the TV channels, almost all, I can say with 100% confidence and data, almost all channels are losing in finance, in economy, in profit. Everybody is actually having less revenue. So naturally they become dependent. So
Right.
when they become dependent and the economy is down, so advertisers and even the corporates do not actually enter with a lot of money. They do not have that much flush of funds. So what happens? These media houses finally end up by taking money from government. Just one simple example, which was officially announced strangely by the same government, that the campaign for women and child development that was
Right.
sanctioned something like 1000 crores or whatever money, 78% of that money actually went only in advertising, so not for the cause for which that money was sanctioned. Now
Right.
that advertising comes only from one source, that is government. They may, hide it in different form. Like they may say this is a department advertising. They might say this is railways advertising. They might say this is ONGC advertising. But actually all of them are controlled by the government and the money is spent from the government sources, government exchequer. And so when that money comes, naturally the media which needs money to run their house, because 24 by 7 is a very, very tough challenge to get money and to run the show.
Right.
24 by 7 to run the show is very difficult and the money is required, and that money comes only from one source. There may be many channels, they may be breaking news, but there is only one source of funding. Primarily, almost 80% of funding comes only from one source, that is government. Just like elections, after the electoral bonds were issued, 95% of the electoral bonds were purchased by only one party, that is the BJP. Only 5% of the bonds went elsewhere. Or take the CSR. Now, CSR is being given only to those organizations or associations or movements or campaigns which are connected with the RSS or with the government agencies. So, naturally, even opposition or NGOs, different NGOs, most of the NGOs have been scrapped because many of the NGOs like Amnesty and others who were critical of the government, objectively critical of the government, they were harassed, some of them were arrested, Akar Patel was arrested, and therefore what we find today is that breaking news is a fake thing. Source of money is not only corporate plus government, and because of the crony capitalism, corporate and government have a symbiotic relationship, and therefore corporate interest and the government interest and the media interest have become one. So there is commonality. So actually, we are living in George Orwell's Animal Farm. We are not living in a democracy at all today. And therefore, I think all this began after 8990 because between 85 and 90, there were critical people of Rajiv Gandhi, but nobody objected to that. There were people who were saying he's a computer boy and we don't need computers. We need drinking water. We need schools. We don't need computers. We don't need TV. We don't need color TV. There used to be a big debate between whether there should be color TV or no color TV, computer or no computer, modern telecommunication or no telecommunication. And some conservative people with good intentions would say, "Arey, we lived all our life without TV, all our life without telephone, and we carried our life happily. So why this Rajiv Gandhi is bringing all these fashionable models of television and telephone? They are actually going to ruin our cultures." This was a negative Luddite campaign against that. But at least the
Kumar,
debate,
even computerization of railways.
yeah,
Computerization was railways was criticized so much.
yeah. So there were strikes against computerization in railways. Railway employees went on strike. Bank employees went on strike against computerization. But at least I will say, with all that criticality, there used to be debate on computers, on technology, on unemployment, whether technology can bring employment or not. That used to be debate. That is a secular debate. But today we are not discussing that. Today we are discussing Ram Mandir with Kashi Vishweshwar. We are discussing Somnath Temple and we are discussing Christian schools. We are attacking, so the whole debate, even those debates who are critical of computers, I can understand because that was a secular debate. Today, it is not secular debate at all. So therefore, I think the focus, the agenda, the debating points, Amartya Sen talked about argumentative Indians. Today, there are no argumentative Indians. There is only one argument, and that comes from PMO. And that argument is published and that argument is promoted. That is the unfortunate issue which has been picked up by the media. And therefore, today, media we consider as irresponsible. Not every journalist is irresponsible. Not every journalist is communalist. But he is governed by so many other forces which actually force him to take this position.
Right. Coming back to you, Tom, again. With so much of disruption which has been caused by COVID in the last 2 years, uh, logistics and supply lines have broken down, distribution has become so difficult. Media houses, especially, and the print media particularly, have suffered tremendously. And if you see, probably as Kumar sir was just mentioning, the funding of these houses has become a real problem for them just to stay afloat, just to put two and two together, make the two ends meet. That has become such a problem. As a result of that, uh, I think what we see on television nowadays, most of the debates that we see on television are not talking about uh, any significant national issues. They are basically debates on trivial issues. And one of the reasons for that, in my opinion, is probably because nobody wants to rock the boat because they don't want to lose the funding that they're getting from maybe the government, maybe the corporate, whatever it is. So, do you think, in your opinion, do you think that this situation, these trivial media debates, television debates particularly, sees once we get over this pandemic situation at some point of time, hopefully we will get over it, and once we get over that, do you think there could be a possibility of getting back to normal again? And more importantly, would the people of India at any point of time say to these media houses that, look, we've had enough of this nonsense, please give us news which really matters? What is your opinion on that?
I would like to take these points. I will take it into 2 points or 3 points. One is what has happened with the pandemic. Yes, like any other business, media has suffered. Media suffered more because there was a proliferation of all the social media at that point of time, inevitably and rightfully so, because the normal media channel like newspapers are not reaching on time. There was a disruption in the distribution, and there was always logistics issues which happened. So in that point of time, absent-mindedly or with the rightful reasons, we promoted social media. It was inevitable and it was required and it happened. So our dependence on normal newspaper and media reduced substantially. We started looking at telephones, mobile phones as our primary, the knowledge on media, what we get, news or anything. There was a shift, and the shift suddenly happened. I think one of the main reasons is because of the pandemic. We didn't have a choice, and it did happen. So, will we go back to the old status of what media used to be, the traditional media of newspaper and television, which was, I think it's $1 million question. I personally don't believe it's going to happen like that. We have to change, and the media is capable of changing their way of reaching the readers or the audience, whatever way. The second part of it is whether these discussions which happen on television, which is more on trivia, not any in depth or serious matters. I think I would say we are discussing serious matters, but whenever we discuss, depending on which side this media house is supporting, they try or tend to bring in people of such nature. That is point number one. Point number two is the people are also not wanting to, show some seriousness. Neither the listener nor the speaker is showing kind of seriousness. It's they want to show I am one better than the other on the channels what we see. So there is a lot of shouting, there is a lot of howling. I think Mr.
It's become
Katkar is very much
more like entertainment than news.
yes, exactly. It is more like entertainment, and the anchor also promotes it because he thinks there'll be more viewers. So I think it
Absolutely.
gets related to the TRP. How best I can have more audience looking at it. You know, when you keep changing channels and when you find somebody is fighting on the channel, maybe I'll stop and look at it. Familiar faces. Why are they fighting? Probably that is one of the reasons which is happening. And to me, if you ask me, serious journalists definitely don't like it. I personally feel that will change because media will become definitely it's a very serious thing. As we say, fourth estate is the the what holds a democracy together. I
Absolutely.
think as Dr. Sam Pitroda said, see, diversity is what drives India, and I think that diversity, that different thinking, what happens in the Indian subcontinent, definitely it is going to bring back the sanity into all of this, is what I feel. There could be some fallout, some media houses may fall because they are not able to generate the right revenues. But in the end, I feel the people of India will recognize what is rightful media.
Right.
And I think we'll come back to the, if not the old way of doing it, there could be a different way of doing it. Like we are today debating on this format on a internet, television channel, which
Absolutely.
is promoting responsible journalism.
Right.
And I think that is very thing what is going to happen. Slowly, more and more people will get into it. It's not that somebody will not call me to discuss on a television channel. I would rather discuss here rather than go to a television channel because I don't want to waste my energy on it, wherein people don't are not taking it being taken seriously. And I'm sure all the journalists recognize it. It is not being taken seriously. They are just doing it for the fun of it every day evening, is what I feel. So I feel there is going to be a shift, there is going to be a change. How it happens, I think only time will tell.
Right. So, picking up on that point, Dr. Petroda, media has changed because of the pandemic to a great extent, probably from the print version to the online version. Now, which probably means that your production costs and the costs of running the business have appreciably come down because you probably need to travel less, you need to have lesser, boots on the ground, covering news and all that. So, in that sense, uh, would you say that this shift which has happened is a good thing because it has cut down the costs and therefore probably also to a certain extent the reliance on advertisement and the revenue coming in from different sources. So, is this the way forward, in your opinion?
Well, we all understand that digital media is the way to go.
Right.
You don't need big printing press. You don't need a lot of paper, but you move on to the new platforms.
Right.
But new platforms also require a lot of capital. Believe
Right.
me, it is not free,
Right.
because to get attention from people, you need to promote new media, because there is so much out there
Absolutely.
that you don't know what to focus on. So if you take your print paper into digital paper, that doesn't guarantee that everybody will come.
Right.
You need to promote that digital paper also. Digital paper is also based on advertisement model.
Right.
Of course, information is being democratized. Of course, as a result, co-creation becomes very important. So in earlier newspaper setup, you had 45 correspondents or reporters all over the country, full time. Now they could be part time. Now source of information could come from multiple sources. So the entire model is changing. You look at all the major newspapers in US, they're not doing well. In Chicago, we had Chicago Tribune, very prestigious newspaper. There's a big building called Tribune Tower where they had their printing machine and all that. That entire building is now being converted into apartments, because you don't need all these offices.
Right.
You don't need that big printing press. So a lot of things have changed, and it will change even more. The bottom line is, it is going to be decentralized. It is going to be online. It is going to come from multiple sources. But the fact still remains that you need to be rational, unbiased, honest, and give truth and allow much broader coverage, and not put your biases in it, because you can put the same bias in digital media.
Right.
Digital media doesn't guarantee that it will be unbiased news.
Right.
So the challenges are fundamental, but in a different platform.
Right. Absolutely. Picking up on that, Kumar sir, if I may ask you this, there are a lot of these online news channels now who basically write news only online. They don't have a print edition. They don't have like a hard copy of their news coming out at all. And we also have these web magazines which are there in the same space. So, in your opinion, do you think that ultimately these could be less biased than the print media, given the fact that they probably their operating costs are a little lower, and they do not really need to be so dependent on advertisement revenue or in any largesse coming in from any source? So would you say that these kind of media uh, magazines or media houses or media portals would be the way forward, and they would actually reduce the kind of bias that we see today?
That remains to be seen, but what Sam said is correct, that pandemic has helped, and primarily pandemic is helped because the technology has come to rescue. But
Right.
that does not mean that it has been able to occupy the entire space of 900 TV channels and something like 10,000 newspapers. It is extremely difficult because that requires access to computer, access to smartphones, access economically, the use of all that media. So that has not yet reached. And so people are simultaneously using social media as well as what we can call conventional media. But
Right.
social media has picked up. In last about 4 years, there are many newspapers which are only on the social media. There are many channels, there are many YouTube channels which are
Right.
exclusively on the social media, and therefore they are spreading. So
Right.
definitely the replacement has begun. but the replacement at present is not as large as it should be to make a complete change. That complete change is not likely to happen in a couple of years, because at that time we'll realize that the same campaign that was done by the television and by the print media on communal and casteist terms is being done now on social media.
Exactly.
And those who have a lot of money, the way they put social media as their slave is indicated by some of the, kind of media, social media owners. In half a second, by one push of a button, their message or their campaign or their propaganda or their evil kind of information spreads to millions of people across the world. Across the world, millions of people watch the same news, which is actually a fake news. So it becomes a fake news propaganda of the social media. And therefore, it will require, I think, not just a couple of years, it will require a long time for social media to get stabilized. Only one good thing is that people, that is the readers and the viewers, have begun to distrust and dislike the television channel and their debates and the newspapers and their coverage. So actually, people are alienating themselves from the press and from the TV. That's according to me a good news. But that does not mean that alienating from there and joining the social media, which is spreading evil, I think it is going to be not less dangerous. However, the growing awareness of the people is likely to help, but that will take a lot of time. And for that, the medium is social media again, unfortunately. So social media, to fight social media, is going to be the main issue. Hopefully, people will also start distrusting the social media, because social media is not focusing on issues. So I will support social media, but keep alarm on.
Absolutely. So, Tom, on that point of the social media, do you think it would be possible at any stage to have a watchdog on the social media to generally see, that this fake news industry, which is almost like a parallel news industry in itself, does not take over social media completely? What are your thoughts on that?
See, it may not be possible to completely control. It's like saying, can you control crime in this country? I mean, that question is as good as that. It's not possible. But then to have control, to have some kind of a censorship which is controlled by the government is very essential, because what we see today, I think it's like a free for all. You do what you want. And as Mr. Katkat said, you press a button, it goes to millions of people just like that. And it can be a fake news. Today, for example, what comes on the WhatsApp or on the Facebook and YouTube, we do not trust. I'm sure all of us are victim to some of these news items which have no relevance at all. So I think it's high time that the government took things into their hand and took some kind of initiative to censor it. Giving fake news to the public, I think it's a disservice and it's like a crime. According to me, it's criminal. So I think there should be a very strong body which should take action. It can be through police, it can be through any kind of systems or process. But I think, as Mr. Katkat said, it's going to take a hell of a lot of time, because it's huge. Social media can activate anything, any kind of news from anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
So it is so fast, so easy, but it's going to be so difficult. But it is essential. It requires control, for sure.
Right. So I think we've almost come to the end of our discussion, probably overshooting our time. One last question to you, Dr. Pitroda. You're such a visionary. What silver linings do you see in the present situation going forward for the media? And
I believe over a period of time, every citizen is going to be empowered. Every citizen will learn to find their own facts. Every citizen will have capabilities to access large amount of information. Through proper AI, machine learning, you will be able to filter things the way you want to see. If I get news and I don't want news about, let's say badminton, it will not come to me. Today, a lot of things come to me and I don't have my own filter.
Right.
So I think technology will allow me to build my own filter. So it will automatically say, this is fake news for you.
Right.
And I see a day where there'll be an algorithm for me that I want technology news, I want truth, I want diversity, I want environment, whatever. And these filters will go through this massive set of information and will say, Sam, this is news for you. Today, I'm bombarded by all kinds of people and I have no filters. So then all the junk will not even come to me. Then people will find out that if you publish junk, every filter blocks you. That's the vision I have.
Okay. That's so comforting to hear, Dr. Pitroda. I hope that day comes soon for all of us. So that's it from me. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, gentlemen. It's been such an education for me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks to my colleagues. I think Dr. Kumar and Tom have done a great job. And thank you, Mr. Ghosh, for hosting it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
Tom.
day.